I'm back in my office at Columbia Self-Storage, and I'm starting a new series today called Critical Race Theory Thursdays. And why am I doing that? Well, we are in a time where we need every superpower we can muster, every idea, every smart analysis of what's going on, every useful strategy. And critical race theory provides us with all of that. If we ever needed it, we need it now. It is so broadly misunderstood. I watched a Charlie Kirk video last night where he condemns critical race theory, something he calls critical race theory, as dangerous. And of course, he had no idea what he was talking about. So I'm going to spend Thursdays just doing short descriptions of some of the most important moves of analysis, forms of analysis from critical race theory. What I want to start with today is Derrick Bell. He's one of the founders of the critical race theory movement. He was a professor at NYU Law School. He was just an incredibly gentle, moving, kind human being. And his writing changed my life, and it changed so many people's lives. So one of the most important pieces that he wrote, and that I have always taught almost every year, is called the Interest Convergence Dilemma. It's from 1980. It was in the Harvard Law Review. And it's an article where he engaged the question of to what degree does the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution require the outcome in Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court's 1954 decision that declared Jim Crow racial segregation in schools unconstitutional. What was it about the Constitution that made that decision correct, whereas the court had held in prior decisions, Plessy versus Ferguson, that actually separate but equal was not a problem from a constitutional equal protection standpoint. So why was Brown right and Plessy wrong? And what he does in the Interest Convergence Dilemma is he offers this idea that in a society like the United States that is structured at its core around white supremacy, we will go through cycles where there are great advances in the rights of disfavored groups like Black people in our country. But those victories, those advances come because it is in the interest of white people that the court or that the Constitution be interpreted that way. So in the Interest Convergence Dilemma article, he looks at 1954 and he says the United States was in the middle of the Cold War, a struggle with Russia. Our international reputation was damaged by the fact that we had such severe racial segregation in the United States, and we were saying that we were a democracy, we were a just society, and the Soviet Union was not. And so there was an international reputational hit that the U.S. was taking for the continued maintenance of Jim Crow. So it was in white people's interest to repudiate Jim Crow and to do so as a constitutional matter. He didn't say that there was anything compelled by the Constitution, but more that it was in white people's interest. There was an interest convergence, as he writes it, between the interests of white people in the society at large in the United States and the interests of Black people. And he said what we will see are these cycles where the interests of white people and Black people, or white people and gay people, or the greater society and women, whatever the group might be, converge, thus producing advances in the notion of equality in our society, and then that will retrench once that convergence is no longer a strong one. And in so many ways, I think that helps us understand where we are right now, where we see a Supreme Court that has absolutely no interest in protecting the equality rights of people of color, of women, of gay people, of trans people. And we have a government that is generally deeply racist, deeply sexist, deeply homophobic and transphobic. It's not in the powerful people's interest any longer as a reputational matter to perform equality through the Constitution or otherwise. And I think Bell's insight in the Interest Convergence Dilemma is a really strong one. Now, he's often referred to as a pessimist. I mean, that is a kind of a pessimistic idea of a deep constitutional value, but I think it's fairer, as Alexis Hogue, a professor at Brooklyn Law School, has said, to describe him as a realist. We have to stay in the struggle, finding those convergences, and I think that's what we have to do today. And that's also what Professor Alexis Hogue argued in a comment that she published just shortly ago in the Harvard Law Review, where she reflected on Bell as her professor. She TA'd for him in constitutional law, and she said, you know, we had that blip after George Floyd's murder where white people were all about Black Lives Matter. We seem to be making all sorts of progress around police violence. Maybe the society was becoming a much more just place when it comes to Black lives actually mattering. But she said, you know, this is a cycle. And it is one that will later retrench, and that's the retrenchment we're seeing now. So long, racism is a bad look, as Hogue says. It has a kind of bad odor to it. Then we're going to see the larger society lean into stronger equality protections. But when we're in a climate, as we are now, where no one seems to care that we're particularly racist, in fact, they're governing from a position of white superiority, patriarchy, heteropatriarchy, then they're not shameable in the ways that Derrick Bell described in the Interest Convergence dilemma, and then Alexis Hogue reflects on later and more recently. So I think this idea of interest convergence can be a very useful one for us, drawing from critical race theory to figure out where there are those interest group, values-driven convergences with the larger society, with the governing power bodies, where we can find a possibility, an opening to move the needle around things like racial justice, gender-based justice, trans justice. It's going to take time. It's definitely going to take time, but this ought to be one of the tools in our toolkit. All right, Critical Race Theory Thursday, Derrick Bell, Interest Convergence Dilemma.